Eric said he's going to be here. Kane said he's going to be here. Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, he's working Roger's feet. Sweater. Alright. So you want to go ahead and start, I guess? Yes. Is it streaming?
Yeah, let's start with
Test. Phone flipped over. I'm hoping it's got the same angle.
Oh.
Test. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know that some people will be filing their way in. So we heard Dennis Powers has come down with something, so thoughts and prayers out to him. And so we'll just have Roger Kane, Richard Briggs, and Frank Niceley today. Just to give you a little bit of a history, Tennessee Liberty Alliance started in 2008. Myself and about 8 other people were the founding organizers. And right now it's kind of just me. I am looking for some leadership. If anybody has any volunteer experience, that'd be great. And got a couple of shirts over there at the table. One says March Against Monsanto, and if you think Monsanto is just a corporation and it's a free market, well, they're the biggest corporatists in the United States. They're in and out of the EPA as far as their leadership. So anyway, that's something that I've produced in the past. And then also the Federal Reserve T-shirts. It's one thing that I'm proud of, something that I had in mind for quite a while. It's Federal Reserve drawn as a casino with some of the players on the outside of it. And if anybody can tell me the players on the outside of it, they'll win a T-shirt. The March Against Monsanto T-shirt's $5. The Federal Reserve T-shirt is $20. So with that, I'm going to introduce Grant Henry. Grant Henry's one of the hosts of the Real News Show. We air from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And if you haven't listened in, what are you doing with your life? That's what David Sean Thompson would say. He's one of the hosts as well. So in front of, well, I was going to introduce Grant, but I didn't mean to mention, in front of you there's pads of paper, not necessarily for notes, but if you have a question. So we're going to let you write your questions down on the piece of paper. And then Grant's going to come up. Introductions will be made of our legislative friends here. And so while the introductions are being made, I'm going to take up the questions, give them to Grant, and we'll go on that format. If there are follow-up questions needed, we'll do that as well. So without further ado, Grant Henry.
Not quite as tall as Richard here. I appreciate the introduction. I'm Grant Henry, as Richard let everyone know. I want to first thank everyone for being involved today. The individuals here who need no introduction, I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute. Very busy individuals, and we want to let you know that we are truly appreciative of you all being here and your commitment to public service as well. I also want to thank the Talk Radio House 92.3 for letting us in their doors, and I also want to thank Tennessee Liberty Alliance for hosting and coordinating this. There's simply too many people in that organization to list properly with the time we have, but I want to let them all know how truly humbled I am that they think highly enough of me to moderate this panel today, and hopefully within the next hour and a half I can maintain that reputation. But as Richard said, you'll see the pads in front of you here if you have any questions. I think the first question I have to ask will take up more than enough time for you all to get those questions down. And last thing I said is no introductions needed, but if we could go down the line and let us know quickly who you represent, what you represent, and maybe a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm State Representative Roger Kane. How about on? There we go. Hey, I'm State Representative Roger Kane. I represent Northwest Knoxville, Carnes, Hardin Valley, Ball Camp, Farragut North, Solway, and that part of the county. I'm in my 5th year, going into my 6th and final year in the House. I chair education in the House, and I was on insurance and banking for several years too. And I've enjoyed my time in the House. I think we've made some great progress as a state. You know, educationally wise, we used to always talk about, thank God for Mississippi and Alabama in education, because 48th was about where we hung. We've made a good amount of progress in these last couple years. Just recently, our 4th graders, for the 2nd year in a row, placed 24th in the nation, and our 8th graders placed 31st in the nation compared to other children with similar time periods. So that's been a lot of work. We have stressed out our teachers. We've stressed out our parents. We had to disassemble Common Core. That was one of my committee's jobs. We did just a whole bunch of fun in the last couple of years to make it productive and useful, to make sure we're getting a quality product. There was a time in our country where people would not accept high school diplomas from Tennessee and some of our East Coast schools. They didn't think we were doing a great enough job with our children. Now that's no longer the case. This year I'm going to truly try to work on reading initiatives. Right now only 43% of our children read on grade level in the 3rd grade. We passed a law 7 years ago that we would not socially promote. So my question keeps going, well, which one is it? If we've only got 43% reading on grade level, how does 57 continue to go on? And you know, we have intervention programs and reading initiatives, but I really want to find out, where is this problem? And right now, the best I can figure out is we throw children into school based on chronology. Your birthday falls on blank, and therefore you're in. We may need to rethink that process. We may need to rethink that maybe boys don't go in at the same time as girls do. Boys are generally a little bit behind at that point in life. And just because your birthday falls on blank doesn't mean that you're really ready for school. And the other thing is, if you're not ready to go on, we are doing a horrible disservice pushing these children on just because we want them out of public school by the time they're 18 or 19 years of age. We're doing them a disservice. They go on to not be able to hold jobs, crime. I mean, they actually factor in prison beds by who can't read in the 3rd grade. That is one of the calculations that they use. So I want to work on that in my last year in the House, and then I'll pass it off to some other folks.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate being invited here to speak today. I'll keep my remarks just a little bit briefer. I'm Senator Richard Briggs, and I represent going all the way out to Farragut, up to Halls, and if you get on the other side of Magnolia, on the west side of it, you're in my district, as well as all of downtown Knoxville and the University of Tennessee campus. In the state Senate, I'm on the state, and by the way, I see Elaine Davis, my former colleague on the county commission, walked in. I didn't get a chance to greet her when I came here, but it's good to see you again, Elaine. But I'm on the committees that I'm on in the state Senate are the Health Committee. I am a medical doctor, so that has had a lot of interest to me. I'm on the State and Local Government Committee, and I think that was very appropriate since I'm a former county commissioner here in Knox County. I'm on the Transportation Committee for the first time this year, and that was a very exciting committee to be on this year, and I'm also on the Ethics Committee. And I'll just say briefly the interest that I have, because I have gone and spoken at some national meetings about the opiate crisis, and I heard yesterday that President Trump may declare a national emergency, which I think this thing, many of us now realize how serious it is. That's been one of my major interests in the state Senate, because it has an impact on business. It's having an impact on families. The mayor of Nashville's son died about 2 weeks ago of an overdose. So this is not just something that's affecting the poor communities. This is something that's everywhere. We're aware of a former judge in Knox County that had issues also. But I'll pass it on to one of the senior members of our state Senate, Senator Frank Niceley.
Thanks, Doctor. Older and wiser, I might add. He says he's a medical doctor. I'm a medical intuitive. I just look at it and tell you what's going on. I'm Frank Niceley. I was actually born and raised here in Knox County, East Knox County. I was 3rd or 4th generation Knox County. My great-granddad had a grist mill out on Flat Creek. But I moved to Jefferson County right after I graduated from UT, and I represent Jefferson County, Granger County, Union, Claiborne, Hawkins, and Hancock County. Basically everything from Knox County line to Sullivan County line, up 11W. And at one time I represented Squaw Hills, Dean Hills, a little bit of Rocky Hill, along with part of Jefferson County. But Representative Kane made one misstatement in his. He said that little girls were smarter at that point in life than the boys. I'd argue that. I think they're smarter then and they stay smarter the rest of their life. I don't think that. I've raised grandchildren and sons and daughters, and little boys just can't keep up. Bless their heart. And this kindergarten stuff, as pre-K, Vanderbilt has done study after study that says not only is it a waste of money, it's actually harming the boys. And there are like 10 times as many boys kicked out of pre-K, and then when they go to kindergarten, they say, well, that little rascal troublemaker, keep your eye on him. And then he goes to first grade, and they said, oh man, he's a terror, he's going to be an outlaw, keep your eye on him. And little boys don't have a chance. They get marked early on just because they can't sit still. They think there's something wrong with them. So I think we need to, I've had 2 different old first grade teachers tell me the worst thing ever happened in first grade was kindergarten. And if they do away with kindergarten and use that money and those teachers on farther up in 5 through 8, that we'd be a lot better off. But don't get much support from kindergarten teachers. But I'm not wanting to just move them on up and let them teach somewhere else. But anyway, I'm not on the education committee. I'm on agricultural, environment, and transportation. But I've always had a deep interest in education. We did pass a bill a couple years ago where they have to teach Tennessee history and the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights. And we're having a hard time getting that accomplished. I mean, we passed the law, but with the education, they want to incorporate it all the way through. And we said, no, you need to just teach it in the 7th grade or 8th. Pick a grade and teach it like they did years ago. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses there. We appreciate them. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and slightly hold those up. Richard will pick those up from you. But given this last legislative session, I thought it might be appropriate to immediately address the elephant in the room, the Improve Act, if you will. I wanted to simply ask a question as simply as possible in hopes that any potentially tangential questions might be covered by way of your explanations. And that question being, for each of you, did you vote for or against the act, and could you expound upon your reasoning behind your vote?
Well, I was a no on the Improve Act. When I looked at the funding, the governor and I actually talked about this pretty extensively. First of all, when I first got elected, I had a pickup truck that got 12 miles to the gallon. This is only 5 years ago, okay? Well, when I got elected, I bought a car that gets 30 miles to the gallon. But the week of the Improve Act, I was in a rental car because my 30-mile-a-gallon car was in the shop. It got 41 miles to the gallon. And I told the governor, I said, I agree that we need a gas tax for roads. I totally understand. Not an increase. We need the tax that we have. But we've got to come up with a different funding model to supplement this. I said, otherwise we're going to be right back here in 5 years having the exact same conversation, because as car mileage improves, you get less and less tax, even though you raise the tax, because, the cars today, 5 years from now, a lot of them won't be on the road. And the ones replacing them will be getting better and better fuel efficiency. So that idea that we tax a consumption product was a good idea when there was no push to improve. Everybody remembers the 70s and the 80s. I remember a car that used to get like 8 gallons to the mile, my wife's father left us this giant Cadillac that you kind of aimed the hood ornament at the middle of the road, and it got horrible gas mileage, but nobody cared. Gas was cheap, but as time's gone on and things have improved, and the federal government's demanded efficiencies, the cars have gotten more and more efficient. My other disappointment was that, the last 3 years we have had budget surpluses. Now, budget surpluses to me means we overtaxed our people. And that money doesn't belong to us in the legislature. It belongs back to the people because we overtaxed you. But we've also had deficits too, since the time I've been there. But the last 3 years we've had surpluses. And the fact that we didn't use any of the surplus, not in any of the last 3 years, to help cover, at least give it like a big jump start. You know, here's $2 billion out of a $6 billion project. The other thing is I'm kind of a math geek. You know, we're going to raise an extra roughly about $250 million a year with this tax increase that we just did with the gas tax. But if you collect $250 million a year, it takes you 24 years to come up with $6 billion, because it's $250 million every year you're collecting. And so you're looking at 24 years of projects to fund the projects that we have. That's why I told the governor, we need another funding model, not just a gas tax. Leave it at 28 cents and let's look at some other resources that we have. That's why I was more of a fan of the Hawk Amendment, to where we were actually using the overages we're collecting, I guess would be a better way to say it, to help fund this. But you know what? It was one vote. It was incredibly important, but everybody had a different reasoning thought process, and that was mine.
I voted for the largest tax cut in Tennessee's history. And let me explain what that is. You got to remember that the Improve Act, and really they should have changed the name, because the original Improve Act did not cut taxes. It was supposed to be revenue neutral. After we talked with the governor and said that we could not support this, he went ahead and cut the amount of increase of the gas tax. He also cut the food tax more. When this was evaluated, we looked at this now. If you're unemployed on food stamps and you drive a truck that gets poor gas mileage, you probably aren't, you might, but you probably aren't going to have more money in your pocket at the end of the month. But you look at almost every other category, if you're buying your food, if you have a family, if you're getting, I think the cutoff, well, we looked at, I'm on the transportation committee, the cutoff we looked at was about 18 miles to the gallon, then you're going to have more money in your pocket at the end of the month. The Hawk Amendment that Representative Kane was talking about was taking money out of the general fund rather than taking money as a dedicated tax. You have to remember, and the other thing is that my favorite tax is one the Tennesseans don't pay. Somewhere between 30 and 40% of the revenue that comes in on the gas tax is paid by out-of-state people, most of that by out-of-state truckers. And I know there were a lot of false rumors going around that was untrue. They said, well, the truckers will buy the gas in Kentucky and then they'll buy it again in Georgia, and they won't buy gas in Tennessee. It doesn't matter where they buy the gas, they pay the gas tax, because they take their logs and they pay the tax off the logs. They do not pay it off of off where they buy the gas. And if we took it out of the general fund, Tennesseans are paying 100% of that. If we take it the way we ended up doing, people outside the state that are using our roads and tearing up our roads, those heavy trucks have a lot more wear than the others, they're paying for it. And if we're going to do that, if they're tearing up the roads, by golly, they ought to help us pay for it. The other aspect that I heard people say, well, you know, this is just the Haslams because they're collecting the tax and they'll be able to draw the interest on this for a month before they turn it in. This is not how the taxes are collected on gas. It's just like it is on liquor. The tax is paid when the gas is delivered. So when you go to the pump to buy your gas, that tax is already paid. The other part you have to remember, the Improve Act was not just about gas tax. We did, over 3 years, increase the gas tax 2%. But we cut the food tax 20%. If you're ever planning to be retired and you don't have a government pension, in other words, if you have a 401k, we voted to eliminate the hall tax over a period of time. We said, well, didn't you all do that last year? No. We said that we would vote on it every year. This year we said it will be eliminated, and we cut it another 1%. I've got the numbers right here. The Tennessee taxpayers will save $73 million in 2017 and 2018. They'll save $72 million in fiscal year 2018, 2019, and $60 million in 2019 and 2020. I was receiving those numbers. You know, we're getting some of this stuff from the state government. By the way, this came from the Sycamore Institute, which is independent people that analyze this. I still didn't accept it. We sent a letter. Many of you all know about the Americans for Tax Reform. It's a national anti-tax Washington base. The name Grover Norquist may mean something to you. He's the one that asked the politicians to sign a no tax pledge. We sent this to the Americans for Tax Reform to evaluate. I got a letter back from him. Anybody wants to see it, I'll leave it up here when we're finished. It says, if you do not vote for this, you're voting for a tax increase. And by your obligation, because this bill cuts taxes, and you sign the no tax pledge, you have to vote for this. I've got it right here if anyone wants to see it. The other part of this that's more than just the gas tax is that for disabled veterans, we decreased it's a home deduction that disabled veterans get regardless of their income from $100,000 to $135,000. And I was not going to vote to hurt disabled veterans who've been injured in combat. We said we're not going to let the people that drive the electric cars, off scot-free either, because they're using the roads. And so we are going to have a fee on that. In other words, if you use the roads, you're going to pay it. And the only people that pays this are the people that use the roads. We have 50 states in the United States, and 46 of those 50 states have a dedicated gas tax. They don't take the money out of the general fund. And we did have a surplus this year. But you can't plan one-time money for long-term financing of anything. It'd be just like if you got a bonus at your work for $1,000 and said, let's go out and buy a $100,000 house. Well, that money's only going to be there 1 year. You've got to have an ongoing stream of money to do this. And the states that have not used a dedicated road fund, when times get hard, then you have to either decide, are we going to fire teachers, are we going to cut educations, are we going to pay for roads? And we need a dedicated road fund. The other aspect of this is if gas prices start to go up, the tax remains fixed. But see, it's a per gallon, not a percent. Food, probably over the next 10 years, will increase in price. But the savings that we get on food, just through the normal inflation, we'll save more and more and more on it, whereas the gas is not going to be raised anymore. So I voted to eliminate the hall tax. I voted to give the disabled veterans a $135,000 deduction on their homes that they did not have before. I voted to cut the food tax 20%, and I voted for a user tax. The only people pay the gas tax are the people that use the roads. And I also voted that out-of-state people would pay, that's tearing up our roads with the big trucks. I voted that they need to pay 30 or 40% of this whole tax.
Thank you. I voted against the gas tax. Here's something that they always leave out. The Department of Transportation is pretty crafty at leaving it out, and even Representative Kane, I guess, just didn't realize it. I'm probably the only person left in the legislature who voted against the last two gas taxes. I voted against the gas tax in 1988. In 1988, that 21-cent gas tax was bringing in $800 million. That's back when cars were getting 8 miles a gallon. Now then, cars are getting 28 miles a gallon, but that same 21 cents is bringing in $2 billion. That's what they don't tell you. That same 21 cents that brought in $800 million in 1988 is bringing in $2 billion now. The only way you can make a department of the government approach efficiency is starve them for money. There's no competition with the Department of Transportation. They waste a tremendous amount of money. I mean, they do things that just make me cringe. I used to eat out at Lightning's out 4 a.m. They'd come in out there in a crew cab dually, diesel, and they'd leave the engine running so it'd be cool in there when they got back out, and then they'd eat lunch for an hour and a half. So I'm on the Transportation Committee. I give them a hard time. They pretty much hate me. But, all in all, this gas tax was a bad thing. We did cut the tax on food and one thing. It wasn't really a bad deal. But if you make a promise, as I get older, I'm trying harder and harder to keep them. I promised in 1988 I wouldn't vote for a gas tax. Promised in 2017 I wouldn't vote for gas tax. It's real easy just to do what you say you're going to do if you just knuckle down to it. I wish Congress would do that.
Did you have any other follow-up, by the way, or I didn't want to cut you.
The only other thing I want to say is, I saw this Improve Act very similar to what does go on in Washington. In Tennessee, the thing I have really loved is that every bill is a standalone bill. One issue, one bill. We don't Christmas tree these things. And my response at the time with the governor was, You didn't have to hang all the pretty balls off of this thing. If it was so wonderful, let it stand on its own. You didn't. We had 4 bills for veterans tax relief. All of them were killed because we had this amendment on the Improve Act. You know, the Hall's income tax could have been reduction or elimination, could have been a standalone bill. It did not need to be on the Improve Act. So again, philosophically, I just had a problem with it. And my other issue was, you had 37 Republicans in the House vote against it. You had 35 Republicans vote for it. And it took those 35 Republicans and every Democrat to get you a gas tax. That, to me, shows there's a fundamental issue with the bill. If it's that good, you should have some kind of unanimous support for it. But you had 37 very fiscally conservative Republicans who refused to participate, and I was one of them. And, but you can't overcome 35 plus the rest of the Democrats jumping on board.
In the Senate, we had 28 Republicans, and 22 voted for it. And, I don't know what that says between the Senate and the House, but I will say also, within 48 hours of that bill passing, there's a Finnish tire company that's going into Ray County. They're going to put $500 million in infrastructure and going to hire 600 people. In Montgomery County, some of you may have seen LH, they make appliances, washing machines, and things like that. South Korea is going to build their first North American plant in Tennessee. And they said a lot of that had to do, the other tax that I forgot to mention that we cut is the franchise and excise tax. That's the business tax. And we lost, out in West Tennessee, a major automobile manufacturer who, we had a 2,200 acre site out there, and we lost them down to Mississippi because of that. I wish we could have passed this last year. So we have, and also we had 2 plants that decided to expand in Tennessee after we passed this bill, rather than picking up and leaving, and not only staying there, but remaining here. And again, if we want to pay for our roads, and we want Tennesseans to pay 100% of it, if we want to keep people on welfare and food stamps and all of that, we can not vote to cut taxes. But I'll tell you, it's a much bigger issue. And if you ask, I asked Governor Haslam one time why Tennessee was doing so well economically. I thought he would say, well, he's got a brilliant governor, we've got this conservative legislature. He says it's geography. 75% of the American population lives within a day's drive of the state of Tennessee, which means our roads are critical. The reason that businesses are coming here, and the reason that distribution centers from companies elsewhere are coming here, because they need our roads for transportation. And again, this was the law. If you look at the dollars, now some people will say, you can't persuade some people that 300 million is bigger than 100 million or 150 million, but it is. And again, anybody wants to see from the Americans for Tax Reform, I'll leave it up here. I made a copy of this. That's the letter where the most conservative, aggressive, anti-tax organization in the United States reviewed this. And they said, this is the biggest tax cut in the history of Tennessee. And if you sign, which I did, the no tax pledge, if you vote against this, you're voting against tax cuts. You can take little pieces of it, but that's what it is.
Quickly, sorry to interrupt there. Before you pass that mic, could you address just real quick for us where the money from the gas tax actually is going?
Okay, what it is, first of all, 100% of it goes to roads. Yes, it does.
Where does it could go to homeless people and other things too?
No, that's not true.
I want to know because I used to do state and federal regulations.
Well, we changed some of
That's what I want to hear.
we changed some of the rules. And again, there was an article in one of the weekly papers in Nashville says, well, only 2/3 are going to roads. Well, that's not true. It all goes to roads. Is that what happens is that 1/3 of that money comes back to the cities and counties. And so really only 2/3 will go to TDOT. The rest of it comes back to the cities and counties. Of that 1/3 that comes back to the cities and counties, 2/3 goes to the counties and 1/3 goes to the cities.
What do the counties do with the money?
they have to put it on roads. And the other, there were so many, what I call, let's see, what's the term they use today? Fake news. There was the fake news that, that a third of it's going for something else. Well, the something else was for city and county roads. And then there was the other fake news out there that said, well, it's going to go for greenways and bike lanes and stuff. And where that came from, again, there's always an element of truth. The greenway money comes from federal grants, and those federal grants are handled by the Departments of Transportation and the public works system here, but that's federal money that's coming back. That's not Tennessee gas tax money.
And I think we could all agree we could probably spend the rest of this day talking about Prove Act if you wanted to, but unfortunately we're somewhat limited on time here, so I want to get to a few other questions from the audience. If I can put these into two parts, seemingly unrelated. First one being is, why are there no seatbelts on school buses? Second one is, why are there no motor vehicle safety inspection requirements in Tennessee?
Well, the seatbelt bill comes through education a lot. It's been there probably every year for 5 years. Statistically, school buses are one of the safest forms of transportation that you can move large groups of people on safely. Compared to a car, there's not even a beginning of a competition. The way seats are designed in buses, too, maximizes safety for children in the event of a lot of different accidents. And then the whole logistics of how do you enforce seatbelt requirements on a bus. Some of our buses are used from 3 different age groups. From K through 6, then we use them in middle school, then we use them in high school. And the body sizes are different, and do you put in 3 seat belts? Do you put in 2 seat belts? Because we can put 3 elementary school children many times in a seat bus, where you can only put 2 high schoolers, or sometimes only 1, depending on the size of the person. We have had a few tragic accidents in the last couple years, mostly due to driver error and things along that line. But even when you factor that in, of course, it doesn't negate the fact these parents lost children. That is tragic. But it's still but we're looking at, I think, about $19 million to retrofit buses. Now, one of the bills that came out was basically requiring all new buses that are being manufactured to have them. It's not as simple as simply putting a bolt into the floor of the bus and attaching a seatbelt to it, and we have seatbelts. There's a lot more infrastructure that has to go on the bus. The seatbelts are typically tied into the girders of the bus for maximum safety. So there's just a lot of expense, a lot of things like that. And then there's the whole rigmarole of, how do you enforce this? We would have to allocate, especially in the elementary grades, one person. The bus driver's job is to drive the bus. Do you stop the bus when children are out of their seatbelt, like we do? And your mother used to tell you, I will stop this car. Okay, what do you do in the situation when you have 50 children in a bus? Is it worthy to stop for one child not in a seatbelt, or do you have to have a certain number of children not in a seatbelt before the bus pulls to the side of the road? Is that more hazardous when the bus is sitting on the side of the road trying to enforce seatbelt rules, as far as traffic possibly running into the bus? There's all sorts of issues that have to do with it, but it is vital. We've actually addressed the issue. The last bill, it got held up in budget, was basically that all new buses coming out would start doing this, because not only is there a state expense, there's a county expense and a city expense depending on what kind of school system you have. And so where are they going to come up with the funding? To understand our state budget, 34% of our state budget right now goes to TennCare. About 33% of our budget goes to education. We spend about $5 million in social services, 2.1 billion, in roads, and about $1 billion in incarceration. That covers about $30.7 billion of our $37 billion budget. So the question is, where do you pull out the rest of the money to do many of these things? And it can get very, very expensive. Now, as far as state inspection of vehicles, I grew up in Texas. We had to drive our cars every 2 years to get a state inspection. It was complicated. They would not allow, your headlights had to be aimed a certain way, your horn had to be a certain loudness. You could only have so much body damage on the car before the car had to be parked to the side. And it was, even in Texas, we felt it was a bit of government overreach. I mean, I've seen countries like Japan where if you have any body damage on your car, it is in there's no driving that car with a half fender hanging on it. It all has to be, because they have no capacity for a breakdown on the highways. They've got too many people, too much stuff, like in Tokyo. They can't do this kind of stuff. I can see value both ways in a state inspection, but I would find it be another fee for taxpayers to pay, another hoop for people to jump through. Now, I know Nashville does have emissions testing, and that's typically places that have a lot of smog and other issues. And again, I'm kind of, I don't see the value in that one, because again, it's just another layer of state or federal regulation that we make our people jump through. And a fee, of course, because none of these things are fresh air and sunshine. All of them have a fee of some kind. And I don't know that the value offsets the cost of the fee.
I don't need to say too much more. I think Roger said it all. About the seatbelts on school buses. It is not. We know that seatbelts save lives in automobile crashes. The National Transportation and Safety Board does not have clear data that it's valuable on school buses. If that came out where they said we needed whatever the cost, I mean, we have nothing more precious in our children's lives. But the evidence is not clear that on school buses that's the problem. The deaths that we've had on our children on school buses, right here in Knox County, it was a school bus driver texting his prostitute. The one down in Chattanooga, where the children were killed, was I think he was 23 or 24 years old. He was speeding excessively, and it wasn't the first time that had happened, and he was on a road he wasn't even supposed to have been on. So these are driver issues. And I think that what we need to focus on so much rather than just the seatbelts. Now, if the evidence comes out, National Transportation Safety Board does the analysis like they do, and they said we need seatbelts on school buses to save lives, I'll vote for it. But if it's equivocal and we're not really addressing the problem, which is bad drivers, irresponsible drivers, that's where we need to focus. Even if we have penalties on those drivers, we need to screen them more, and then we need to have more severe penalties when we find someone violating the rules.
Well, thank you. I noticed the seatbelt industry has hired lobbyists trying to get us to put seatbelts on school buses. That ought to tell you something right there. Both of these tragic incidents, one here in Knoxville and one in Chattanooga, I don't know that seatbelts would have helped. What would have helped would have had a better driver. You take all that money you're going to waste on seatbelts and hire better drivers, screen them better. And also, both of these drivers were hired by independent contractors. I don't know that we've ever had a fatality in a school bus that was managed by the school system, the LEA. Both these drivers have been complained about. If your superintendent of schools had gotten complaints, your director of schools had gotten complaints on these bus drivers, they'd probably gotten rid of them. But these private contractors, they don't pay anything, and they're desperate to get drivers. I think we need to take a look at that. I've heard that both of these accidents, the same contractor in both instances. Now, I've heard that that's right. Then someone said it's not right. Then I heard again it was right. But I do know they were private contractors. The bus drivers big complaint. Take your seatbelt money, hire better drivers, screen them, and I think our children would be much safer.
One other thing real quick. We put our most precious products into vehicles that are driven by people who make about the same thing as working at Wendy's. It's true. They make about $8 to $10 an hour, and they have to have incredibly flexible schedules. And we're in a scramble to find these people because, and they're vital, but it's kind of like the same thing happens with our most precious mental health issues here in Tennessee. This year we had a huge battle about raising the minimum salary for people who provide care for children and adults in many cases, who have mental disabilities. They're working on they're 35 years old working on the mental acuity of a 3-year-old. We want these people to be able to show up. They're making $8 an hour, by the way. They're making $8 an hour to show up. We entrust them with these folks' care physically. They're also supposed to be responsible for the money when these folks go shopping, especially if they're doing independent living. We're also trusting them to not abuse them in some way. They've also many times have to work split shift. I need you 4 hours from 8 to 12, and I want you to come back with a 3 or 4 hour gap in the middle of the day to help them get ready for bed. Who does that? It is a special kind of love that a person has, that they want to do this. And it's the same thing many ways with bus drivers. They don't do it for the money, but could you get a better crop maybe of people who would be willing to break up their daily life to drive a bus for a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the afternoon? Possibly.
I'm going to make one quick comment. This will be literally 10 seconds or less. I had proposed that, particularly in the rural counties where we have bad roads, is let the school teachers who need more income, let them drive the buses in and then drive it home. And I was told it couldn't be done.
I've had several individuals reach out to me asking me to address the Tennessee Reconnect Act, the one that extends Tennessee promise-free community college to tuition for adults. Well, some of these individuals that reached out to me see this as a much-needed bill, which presents an immense opportunity for our colleges and for thousands of adults. And this is seemingly backed by state estimates suggesting about 20,000 adults every year would use this Reconnect scholarship to go to community college. However, other individuals that have reached out to me are not convinced that the need is there. They're worried that it's an unnecessary expenditure that might be more appropriately placed, say, at the feet of students seeking graduate degrees, especially given the exorbitant student loan debts that this generation currently faces. Moreover, they're worried that this bill would likely lead adults to seek only 2-year degrees that are unlikely to open new or higher-paying career opportunities, thereby potentially wasting the opportunity, or they could potentially even abuse the opportunity just for personal fulfillment alone. So with that being said, what is the impetus for this legislation? Do you believe it will have a real practical effect for the Tennessee workforce, or do you sympathize with the concerns of those that do not support this legislation?
Well, the governor has made an initiative. He's looked out into the workforce requirements in years to come. The days of a high school diploma are gone. That is a nice intro into the workforce, but the days when our moms and dads could get a high school diploma and go work in a factory or go work in some industry, it doesn't exist anymore. We're requiring some kind of higher ed. When the governor looked at the numbers, if every child who graduated from Tennessee high schools today went to college and got a college degree, we're not going to make the numbers if every one of them did it. So what we've been doing is trying to find other ways to re-engage people. Maybe the reason that your life is not financially as satisfying as it could be is because, like many of us, we got out of high school, we were sick of school, we may have gone to a little bit of college, and then life and babies and jobs, and you look up and it's 20 years later. We're giving those people the opportunity to reconnect with the education system. Education has always been a methodology to improve your lot in life, whether it's a 2-year or you start with 2 years and then you finish another 2 years in a 4-year college. Many of the jobs that are coming out do require some kind of certificate, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and that's what this is funding. It is all funded by the lottery. So taxpayer dollars are not being used. It is people who are enjoying the lottery and are spending that money anyway. And I've got to say, when the lottery came to Texas 30 years ago, they used the exact same methodology as they used here in Tennessee. It's about education. It's about the children. We've got to have the lottery because of education. I don't know what that tells children about education, but at least here it has been used for higher ed. In Texas, it's used for K through 12. So when you get to college, you're on the hook for everything. It has been used to shift state funding of education from the state to mix it with the lottery funding. I like our method a lot better. I've had 4 children go through college. With me being able to help them, none of them have graduated with student debt. Or if they are, the student debt would have been a lot lower because of the Tennessee Promise, and if they were to go back now with the Tennessee Reconnect. And it's not just college they can go to. Our tech schools are open. When I ran for office years ago, I asked the question, why do we spend 100% of our educational dollars on what 21% of the population does? Let's get a college degree. Those numbers have not moved a lot. The governor's trying to move them. But about the 21% is about who actually gets a 4-year college degree. But we spend 100% of our tax dollars in high school getting everybody college ready. We need to also look at our tech schools. Finished carpenters make $40,000, $50,000 a year. That's a good middle class life. Plumbers, same thing. and we minimize those positions as somehow less than college educated, they're still great careers because not everybody should go to college. But the governor is trying to get those who do want to go an opportunity through the Tennessee Reconnect, and I support the idea, especially when tax dollars aren't being used.
You asked me which of those two things do I agree with, whether we should use the money for that or use the money elsewhere, and my answer is yes,
sir.
all of
Yes,
them.
sir.
Because I don't know what we need to be doing. I have some of the same concerns about people and the dollars being spent there. I'm going to say something very controversial right now. I think for many, many people, finishing college and graduating and then trying to find a job is not necessarily the best pathway. These Tennessee colleges of applied technology, the 2-year community colleges where you learn a skill, in my humble opinion, is much more valuable to know how to be a diesel mechanic or an electrician. Or I went out here to the Pellissippi College. They have a 2-year degree. We used to call them machinist or something. Well, now you've got to do all of that on a computer. You've got to learn how to do it. I think those 2-year degrees are worth a whole lot more than a degree in anthropology or history or philosophy or some of those. And I'm saying this from a person who has a niece that graduated 5 years ago with a degree in philosophy that's working at Borders at $10 an hour, stacking books. And you want to know who I respect? I respect the guy that goes down here to the TCATs, we call them, Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, does the program down there, and he's a diesel mechanic. That guy knows how to do something. The carpenters that know how to build something. Those are the ones I respect. There's some very good college degrees. You become a teacher. I'm going a little bit more toward the professions. You become a teacher, you become a nurse, you become an engineer, become a lawyer, you become a doctor, you become an accountant. Those are all very valuable college degrees. And I also, it's like taking nails on a blackboard when someone said, well, they're not smart enough to go to college, or they're not capable of doing college, so we'll send them someplace else. I think the smart kids today are the ones that are learning skills, and it may not be in college. And do I think that money is well spent? Yes, sir, I do. We can either keep these people down there working at McDonald's or $10 an hour, or we can make a diesel mechanic out of them, and God knows how much they make. And they're not needing additional welfare. They've got a retirement. We're not going to be putting them on Medicaid or TennCare. We're not going to be doing that. We're making tax-paying citizens out of them. And I think it's skills. And I even tell the young people over there who are, we get these interns that are majoring in political science. What the heck do you do with a political science degree? What you need to do, if you really like it, get a skill, be a nurse, be a teacher, be an engineer. And then, if you're really interested in this, take the history, take the music, take these other courses as part of your personal enrichment in college, but learn to do something, for heaven's sakes.
Dr. Briggs took an 8-year course on how to be a heart mechanic.
My dad, I went to high school 12 years, I went to college 4 years, I went to medical school 4 years, and then I did 8 more years of education after this. My dad finally asked me, he told me 2 things. He says, are you ever going to get a job? And then the second thing is, he says, I think you're getting educated beyond your intelligence.
I did graduate from college. A lot of people don't believe that, but I did. I made 1 D at University of Tennessee, and you'll never guess what that D was in. It was political science. I had a liberal Yankee Democrat teacher. He wasn't much older than I was, and he wanted class participation. But I finally realized that if I didn't quit participating, I was going to get an F. So I quit talking just in time to save my D and got out of there. It's the only D I made. But, the only problem with the government putting money in education is the schools just go up on their tuition. And it happens every time. And I hope these programs work out, and I hope there's people out here that go back to college and do well. But there's no reason for a college education to cost what it costs today. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I think, when we put the first money into Hope scholarships, all the colleges just went up on their tuition. That money didn't go to the parents or the students. It went to the colleges. So I don't know. I think if you've got a good conservative child and you want him to be a bleeding heart liberal, send him to a very expensive college up north somewhere, and you'll get an idiot back. I don't know. Higher education, I really don't know. I've often thought if a kid got out of high school, you just put him in a semi and let him drive to California for 4 years and give him this to listen to. Listen to the classics, listen to history, listen to everything. He would come out of there pretty well educated, have some money in the bank, seen a lot of country. And if he wanted to go on and be a heart mechanic, why, he could. But I mean, look, these colleges, I mean, I put 3 or 4 kids through college, got grandkids coming on. I don't know what they learned anymore. Looking back, I don't know what I learned. A lot of what I learned was wrong. I took economics, and I kind of enjoyed economics. Since then, everything they taught me has been debunked. So, I mean, what good did it do me? Luckily, I didn't take any psychology or anything like that.
Yeah, the fun thing too is we always have interns come to the Capitol every year, and most of them are poli-sci majors or sometimes history majors, and they all go, oh, you know, we say, well, what do you want to do with this poli-sci? Oh, I want to get in politics. I said, do you realize that almost nobody in the House or the Senate has a degree in political science? I can't name one who has a degree in political science. So it doesn't lead to this great career in state government. Even most county people, they're just good people who want to try to make a difference. And political science majors are working at borders for, well, that's psychology. That is still one of the things I am working with Chancellor Davenport about. It is still one of the largest majors we graduate at UTK is psychology, which is crazy. And the second one is sports medicine, or sports management rather. And I'm not knocking sports management, but have you seen us expand any franchise teams in the last 20 years? So literally the job quotient is static. We're graduating all these people with sports management degrees who either have to wait for somebody to get fired or die. That's how you get a job now in sports. And I can speak from experience. My son has one. My daughter-in-law has it at the master's level in sports management. But psychology majors end up being salespeople. Do we really need to have 4 years of college debt to sell car insurance? Really? Or work in some... Because they know psychologically when people pull the trigger to buy something. Well, wow, couldn't we just give a disc like Frank talks about, and if anybody has a CD player in the car anymore, and just pop it in and give them some psychological when people pull the button to buy something and save you 4 years of college, or get you a college degree that's much more useful, like Richard was talking about, nurses, doctors, teachers, engineers. And so we're still fighting with the universities, even with all this new money flowing in, that you have to make sure there's a job out there when these people get a degree, that they don't become dependent on the state with a college degree and student loans, because those student loans start 6 months after you graduate. You got to start paying them back.
We have a couple questions that are in the same vein of fiscal responsibility. First one is, what are the top measures that can be taken to rein in spending by state and local government? And what are each of you doing to be more fiscally responsible with our tax money, and how are you holding others accountable to do the same?
Well, this is a challenge. When I got elected 5 years ago, the state budget, I believe, was $29.1 billion. Today it's about 37 point something billion dollars. And, we've been able to do a lot of great things in Tennessee. I'm in a group of legislators who are always looking for fiscal conservatism. I mean, these like the Sycamore Institute and these groups put out, where do you fall on the political spectrum as far as fiscal conservatism? And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm tight. I usually out of 132 people rank about 5th or 6th as the most fiscally conservative, because I don't see, it's weird, when the money is in your pocket, it's your money. But when it comes to Nashville, even if we somehow have over-collected, it's now become our money. And there are a whole list of projects every legislator has that's been sitting there waiting to be fulfilled. And praise the Lord, we've got a budget surplus of blank. And there's honestly this feeding frenzy that goes on, at least in the House. Now, I can't address the Senate. They're a whole different organization. But in the House, there's this feeding frenzy of spending and nobody's going, no. you over-collected. Give this back to the people you over-collected from. There's no thought process that goes in with that. And so these 37 legislators get together and they say, okay, this needs to stop. This is, if we're going to have budget surpluses, then we either need to rework the numbers when we start the budget and how that all comes together, or we need to make sure that if we're overtaxing our people, we give it back. Richard is correct. The F&E tax was one of the highest in the Southeast. We lost businesses. F&E taxes are collected on businesses, on the stock in people's warehouses when they're incorporated, is where F&E taxes come from. And we lost businesses because they could go to Mississippi and pay 20% less. But again, I felt that was a separate bill that could have been handled on its own to address that issue, as opposed to attaching it to the Improve Act. That was my issue with it too.
You know, I think that's one of the best questions that we've had asked today. And Roger made a very good point. Now, I came up there a couple of years, I can't remember if it was 2 years or 4 years after you did, but I've been up there, I'm getting ready to start my 4th year, and we've seen the budget go from about $32 billion to $37 billion. Now, there's some reasons for that, is that the government accounting changed on how you do your retirement funds, and Tennessee's retirement liabilities are some of the lowest in the nation, and that's good. We also pay for our roads as we go along, and that's good. We have zero road debt. Texas has some excellent roads, but they bonded out $21 billion. And a lot of the states do that. Tennessee has zero road debt, zero. We have the lowest debt per capita by a mile of any other state. I think we're $900 roughly per citizen, and the next closest is Iowa at $1,400. But the point being, I know when we got ready to vote on the budget this year, and someone said, what's the most important thing you voted on? It wasn't the Improve Act, it's the budget every year, because we have to balance the budget. And I started thinking about how this has increased. If you ask me, now this is again a very unpopular way of handling things, but this is what I would do because I like to pay as you go, and it's probably a little bit more appropriate at the county level. But let's say you wanted to build a school, or we needed something where we needed some money for. Or let me back up first. Let's say we've got excess money. I think we ought to cut the sales tax. I think we ought to cut some of these taxes. But when you have something that are one-time things that you need to pay for, I would say let's raise this, let's say we drop the sales tax 3 cents. I mean, that would be huge because we have these surpluses. But when it's time to pay for something, I would put the tax back rather than borrowing the money or just always collecting all this extra money. And we say it's going to take this much time to pay for it. It's going to take 3 years to pay for it. We'll raise the sales tax a penny, and then we sundown it, which means people are going to have to vote on it again. And I think if we did that at the county level and the state level, rather than borrowing money or running these big deficits, or what's even, not deficits, but even the surpluses we have now, what everybody's running around doing, they're trying to find ways to spend the money. I think we ought to cut the taxes, and then if we need to raise it for something, if you're going to raise the tax, you raise it, pay for it, but have a sundown on it, where it doesn't become permanent. We have this professional tax that's $400 a year. These teachers that are audiologists in the school have to pay $400 a year. The doctors and the lawyers maybe can afford it, but not somebody working in the schools. That was passed back when we had budget deficits to balance the budget. That tax has become permanent now. No, this is the F&E.
I'm talking about the wheel tax. It's a temporary tax too.
Right here in Knox County, 1999, or well, 99, they were going to build a justice center downtown. Y'all remember that? And they raised the taxes to pay for the justice. Well, they didn't build the justice center, but the tax didn't go away. We had the wheel tax here in 2006, I believe. Oh, we're going to do this, and we'll have the money for it. Well, they raised the tax and didn't do anything for it. And when you don't need it, I think every tax that's passed needs to have a sundown so it gets reevaluated. But when there's things to pay for, whether it's a school or something like that, you raise it, saying this is how much money it'll raise over the next 3 or 4 years, you pay for it, and then the tax goes away.
Now that is a good topic we're talking about here. Tennessee has 3 distinct branches of government. They're not equal. The Constitution doesn't say they're equal. It says 3 distinct branches. Now under this governor, we've gone from $28 billion to $37 billion. Now that's a lot. I mean, that's over $1 billion a year. increase. And in spite of that, we have $1 billion surplus. Why do we have $1 billion surplus? Well, when Speaker Harwell became Speaker, she invited Art Laffer, Ronald Reagan's economist and Trump's economist. He lives in Nashville now. He moved there from California. She invited him to come in to talk to the caucus. We had a retreat, the caucus there. And he told us, he said, if you will abolish inheritance tax and the gift tax, in about 3 or 4 years, you'll have more money than you know what to do with. Well, we didn't know whether to believe it or not, but we told everybody we were going to cut taxes, so we did. And sure enough, in 2 or 3 years, we started having surplus. The last 2 years, we've had $1 billion surplus. Unbelievable. Now that, we have to $1 billion surplus after abolishing the inheritance tax, abolished the gift tax, almost got the Hall's income tax abolished, and we've cut the tax on food from 5.5% to 4%, and still got a surplus. So your question is, how do you control spending? You have to have a legislature that will tell the governor, no. We can do it. The governor sends a budget over to us. Now we can do anything we want to with that budget. We can pitch it in the trash and write a new one. We almost did that one time, and it probably got me beat. McWhirter made the governor really, really mad. Governor McWhirter, he really, really didn't like that. But we came within 3 votes of passing an alternative budget. But we've got to get a mindset in the Senate and the House that the governor's budget is just a starting point. And we don't have to spend all that money that he wants to spend. Just take a pencil, just cut it and arc out things and send it back to him. He'll veto it. He'll send it back to us. In Tennessee, we're lucky that all it takes to override the governor's veto is a simple majority. We don't have to have a 2/3 majority like Washington. So the same number of votes, that 51 in the House and 17 in the Senate, can override the governor's veto. But we're going to have a House and a Senate that will tell the governor, we're not going to increase this budget $1 billion.
Amen, Frank, and I agree with him. But you know, there's issues when you go to cut the budget. You know, there's only a couple of places. The big items in the budget. Roger's already mentioned this. Medicaid's the biggest, and the best way we can cut the Medicaid. I think the best social program in the world is a good job with benefits. And you know, we talked about the Tennessee Reconnect. We can talk about Tennessee Promise. We can talk about cutting taxes so businesses come here. The best social program benefit in the world is a good high-paying job with benefits. And that's what we need to do. We've got to get the people, the Medicaid's the biggest part. Let's get the people off Medicaid. Senator Tracy and I had a bill this year. We ran into some government roadblocks on it, is if you're getting food stamps, if you're a male between the ages of 20 and 49 and you do not have dependent children, you cannot get food stamps unless you're either working 20 hours a week, doing volunteer work 20 hours a week, or you're getting educated 20 hours a week. And I think they did that up in the state of Maine. And they got about 20% of the people, more than that, they went from 40% of the people on food stamps down to about 20%. And that's what we need the job to cut it there. Can we cut it in education? There's always fat in education. I mean, there's things there, but that's a little bit harder to do. The road fund is dedicated, and so you have to decide what we're going to do. But I think the biggest place, because it's the biggest part of the budget that we can work on, is getting these people off of Medicaid. I mean, that's the big dollar issue in the budget.
Here's something else with those numbers I threw out about 34% being for Medicaid. When Governor Bredesen, an administration ago, had to do those drastic cuts, it was getting ready to break the state budget with TennCare. And so the whole goal was to get back, we got it back to, was it Frank, about 25% of the state budget was TennCare. But have you noticed the number I told you? It's back up to 34. In 8 years, it's crawled back up to 34, and it'll become 36, and then it'll become 40. Now, every time it goes up, now this is just providing health care for our poorest citizens. Every time it goes up, there's less money to do. I mean, you might have some natural growth that goes on that you've seen, but there's less and less money to do everything else. And so we might have to have another Bredesen moment where you cut another couple 100,000 people off of TennCare, and that will be brutal. No legislator ever looks forward to that, but it's just how these things happen. You know, it's kind of like in Knox County right now, education is 67% of the Knox County budget. Now, that's fine, but the mayor has to run everything else, the sheriff's department, all these other functions, road paving, all the other things he does. Every year as education increases, there's less and less money to do all those other services that people demand. And, you know, one of the things that we're looking at in the House is that we kind of do things in reverse, and Frank may remember when this happened. It used to be that the House came up with the budget. That was in the Constitution, that we came up with the budget, and we gave it to the governor, who then tweaked it. And so somewhere about 30 years ago, this shifted. And now what the governor does is he calls all of his departments, he asks them for their recommended budgets, the governor's staff puts all these numbers into basically a budget, and they give it to us. So it's actually kind of reverse of the way it's supposed to happen. And this conservative caucus in Nashville is about over it. They want to go back to the other way of doing it, where we create the budget, give it to the governor, and then he can tweak, and then we have this, it's just a shift in power, because constitutionally, that is our job, is to pass a balanced budget. The problem is we don't have any part of the whole construction of it. It's basically done by departmental heads getting with his executive team, and it kind of works in the reverse. So this will be interesting going forward.
Let me say one thing again about the Medicaid, because he was talking about having to disenroll maybe another 100,000 people. What we're hearing from President Trump and the Republican Congress right now about the block grants, per capita cap block grants, removing the federal mandates, this is what I ran on 4 years ago, and I was criticized pretty heavily for it. But this is exactly the program that the Senate Republican House and the Senate Republican leadership has talked about, and exactly what President Trump's talking about having caps on this and then removing from the state the mandates. What I said 4 years ago is that they ran an ad against me about per capita caps. But it's the only way you can get a handle on this budget, and you have to remove the federal mandates. If some of you, which you probably don't remember, I said we've got to remove the mandate that every Medicaid patient gets every drug that he wants. We'll buy 5 drugs. What I proposed, we'll buy 5 drugs, and we'll buy the 5 most expensive medicines that you're on. But then you're going to be responsible for the others, and we've got to do that. I mean, it's a little bit hard, but I really think that the Republican Congress and President Trump is right on this.
And Richard and I were on a healthcare task force for about 2 years together, I told Speaker Harwell, it is easy to say no. That doesn't take a real brain, and to be obstinate is really easy, but to come up with a solution. You know, when the Affordable Health Care Act came out of Washington, the idea was every state will expand Medicaid. They didn't factor in that 31 states wouldn't. That never crossed their mind. And Tennessee was one of the 31 states. We have a whole population of people who are stuck. They make too much money to get on TennCare, but they don't make enough money to get any subsidy through the exchanges, because we were supposed to go from 100% of poverty got Medicaid. It went up to 138% of poverty. The problem is, when we didn't expand Medicaid, those people between 100 and 138, we call these the working poor. They've got jobs. I mean, almost 80% of them have sometimes many jobs, 2 and 3 jobs. They still don't make enough money to get any subsidy from the healthcare subsidy programs from the exchanges, assuming we even have one. Right now, I think we're down to, did Blue Cross and Blue Shield come back?
They're seriously considering.
Yeah, right now we have no health insurance companies in the 11 counties around Knox County, 16 counties around Knox County. If Blue Cross and Blue Shield comes back, then these folks will at least be able, if their income level is correct, be able to get some subsidy through the federal government exchanges. I mean, when people find out how expensive healthcare really is, there's no way a lot of people can afford it other than through a great job, like Richard mentioned, or through some kind of a subsidy program. And, you know, is whatever your feelings are about the exchanges, you know, the hospitals used to pick up those people gratis. They just dealt with it and wrote it off on their taxes or whatever. but at the same time, you paid for it too. That's why you're paying $18 for an aspirin, to cover all the other 14 people who came through who didn't have any health insurance. And one of the things that Richard and I found out is the reason that the rates have gone so bonkers. I've sold health insurance since the 80s as an insurance agent. We might have had 8% rate increase, 12% rate increase in bad years. I've never seen 32. I've never seen 62 ever. But when we talk to TennCare and a lot of these others, how did the carriers get it so wrong? The answer was these people never had health insurance. We didn't know what to expect from them. And so when we set the rate, many of these people looked more like Medicaid patients than the general population. They were heavier, they drank more, they smoked more, and the way we've got the exchanges set up, there's no incentive to change that. I tell people, I pay the same healthcare premium rate as a 53-year-old man who weighs 814 pounds, has had cancer twice. We pay the same rate. The only difference being is if he's a smoker, he pays more, and because I don't smoke. That's the only differentiation that we have now. And that system, to me, is, from an insurance standpoint, really hard to factor how that one's going to work for very much longer.
No,
I'll just, I want to add also that my colleague, Roger Kane right here, he has been, right in the middle of this, not only from the insurance part, but we made a trip to Washington last year, and we met with the people from Health and Human Services up there on this same problem. So we really heard it from the horse's mouth about some of the issues that we have. When we talk about how expensive it is, I know everyone says just cut it off. I talked to one of the lobbyists about 3 weeks ago in Nashville. She's 61 years old, and she's going to have heart surgery at Vanderbilt. She pays $1,600 a month for her health insurance, and she has a $10,000 deductible. And if you look at this, she's going to be paying $31,000 this year out of her pocket before any insurance kicks in. Now the problem is, that's just not affordable. And it would be a lot more than that if she wasn't paying the $1,600 a month, because it's going to be a $60,000 or $70,000 bill. It's just, what do we do about it? And what's happened in Tennessee, this gets down to almost a business issue, is that with this disaster of Obamacare, what they did is they cut the reimbursement, the Medicare reimbursement that the hospitals get. And so, because they were assuming that everyone would be insurance, it didn't matter that Tennessee didn't expand, they still got the cuts. And we've seen right here in Knox County, we've seen Baptist Hospital close. We've seen what's now Tenova. That hospital's been sold. Let's say it went from St. Mary's to Mercy to HMA and now CHS, and CHS is having problems. St. Mary's may very well close. They're talking about building another hospital. We've had 9 rural hospitals. In East Tennessee, we've had the one up at Scott County that's closed twice. In West Tennessee, there's been 8 hospitals closed, and in my discussions with the Tennessee Hospital Association, we're about to lose 15 more hospitals. And when Randy Boyd, who's now running for governor, he was Economic Development Commissioner, he said that when you lose those community hospitals, there's no way that I can ever recruit industry and businesses to any community where the closest healthcare may be an hour away. And so this is a business issue. I mean, it's a big problem that we're going to have to try to look at a solution. But I do want to compliment Roger. When Roger speaks, he's speaking with authority, because it's not I heard. He was there when we went to Washington.
This next question is in regards to a bill that California has told us is one of the most inflammatory pieces of legislation to come out of last session, some that are terming it the gender definition bill. The text reads, undefined words shall be given their natural and ordinary meaning without forced or subtle construction that would limit or extend the meaning of the language. Now, although the following terms are inherently gender specific, are you concerned that this bill could potentially interpret terms like husband or wife or father or mother in a gender-specific way, thereby hindering the advancement of LGBT rights? And are you willing to continue to stand behind this legislation regardless of the potential constitutional concerns?
Well, that was the argument when the bill was presented, and even on the floor of the House, that was part of the argument. Once the bill got passed, I believe the AG looked at it and basically said it doesn't do anything. anything. It doesn't change anything at all, which kind of you do find sometimes after you pass a bill that you think is going to be ground shaking, it really doesn't change anything. And so from what I understand, the AG's opinion was this natural definition bill was just a waste of some paper.
The Senate sponsor on that was Senator John Stevens, who's really a very, very bright lawyer, and he basically said it's a nothing bill. And I know I've received some real criticism, and I really think I was misinterpreted. I am a law and order. I've got a military background, as some of you know. I mean, you play by the rules, you do what the law says, and I've had this same issue, whether it's sanctuary cities, whether it's marijuana or whatever. If we've got bad laws, let's change them, but if it's a law, we need to obey it. And people who are in the executive branches, whether they're mayors, governors, or presidents, or whatever, you obey the law. But on this bill, and I said on the Senate floor, and what I meant to say, or what the intention was, because I really, we've got to think about children on these things. And you can't take a woman and say a woman is a father. I mean, that's just, you can't do that. I mean, that's not what the word means. Now, if you want to define it in the law that a woman is a father and a woman is a husband, then you can do that. But let's do it if we're going to do it. And I even said we need a whole new set of legislation to deal with these new issues. That's what I meant to say, or that's what the intention was. And if we do have same-sex couples that have children, and there's been an agreement where, in the event of divorce, the non-natural parent can have access to the kid. I'm talking about in a two female relationships. One delivers the baby, but the other at the time is the partner. Then let's do it for the sake of the child, because I mean that's the point I was trying to make. We're going to have to change other legislation, and we can't use these same words. But until we do, words mean something. And we need to do it, and I think we need to do it, but we just can't. I mean, just a woman cannot be a father. I'm sorry.
Speaking as a
And
that's not how it works on the phone. Yeah.
I want to go ahead and move to this last question, potentially the last question. This question is actually for Senator Niceley. They want to know. Please tell us about your bill on the 17th Amendment, and then if we could get Senator Briggs and Representative Kane's thoughts on that, his bill as well.
Well, it's a good time to do that. I'd rather do that as talk about this new generation of birds and bees. There's a time I thought I understood the birds and the bees, but anymore, there's a whole lot I don't know, evidently. But on this 17th Amendment, our founding fathers, if you go back and read Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments, there's a chapter in there on the 17th Amendment. And the Constitution would never have been ratified had not the little states agreed to ratify it, because their legislatures got to pick the U.S. senators. The U.S. Senate represented the states, the House of Representatives represented the people. It's pretty simple. State's House and the People's House. Well, in 1913, when you had that progressive movement in both parties, and they all went crazy, and we ended up with the Federal Reserve and the income tax, and they took away the way we always elected U.S. senators. So the 17th Amendment, passed 1913, went to the direct election of U.S. senators. A senator up in Granger County was the last one appointed by the legislature, John K. Shields, and he was the first one elected by the people. Well, there's always a group out here wanting to repeal the 17th Amendment. That takes too long. America may not have long enough to do that. Or Dr. Briggs and I may not. He's several months younger than I am. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says that we can't nominate our U.S. senators. Now, we could pass a law here in Tennessee, and I actually had the bill a couple of years ago, got it to the Senate floor, it died in the House, that would let the legislature nominate the U.S. senators. The Democrats would nominate the Democrat, and they could have a good candidate for a change, and the Republicans could nominate the Republican. At that point, we would gain back 90% of what we lost in 1913, when the progressives took away the legislature's ability to elect the U.S. senators. That would restore the republic. I mean, I was just young when I was reading some right-wing newsletter I used to get. I don't read those anymore. And it said that the 17th Amendment helped destroy our republic. Well, I didn't know what they meant. It took me a while to realize that the 17th Amendment did. It moved us toward a democracy and away from being a republic. Now, I guarantee you most high school teachers and most of the college students can't tell you the difference in a republic and a democracy. The Founding Fathers never used the word democracy. It's not in the Constitution, it's not in the Declaration of Independence. No state constitution has the word democracy in it. We were never intended to be a democracy. We were a republic. Well, this would really restore that back. Now, if we could do that here in Tennessee, pass a bill to let the legislature nominate the U.S. senators, that would really put a monkey on our back. That would be a hard vote. So I'd have people want me to stick with Corker or stick with Lamar, or somebody want me to get Dr. Briggs, to nominate Dr. Briggs. It would be a really tough vote on the legislature. But if we did that, I guarantee you, when we called our U.S. Senator on his cell phone, he'd answer. Now, everybody's worried about term limits. They we need term limits. My Tea Party friends, who I refer to as recent converts, in the Bible it says, beware of recent converts because they tend to be overzealous. And that's the way I describe my Tea Party friends. They're recent converts and they're overzealous. Good people and their heart's in the right place and they're on the right track. They just need to calm down a little bit a lot of times. But they say, oh, you're going to take away my right to vote. I said, no, I'm going to restore your Constitution. You really need to. They said, we need term limits. I said, no, you're moving away from the Constitution. We need to turn around and move back toward the Constitution. When America gets in trouble is when we move away from the Constitution. And they say, well, the Constitution just over. I said, you think you're smarter than the Founding Fathers? And some of them do, especially lawyers. A lot of times they think that they're actually smarter than the Founding Fathers. But if there's one thing that we could do that would get Washington under control, it would be if we would start nominating our U.S. Senate candidates. They would answer us back. Now, when I had that bill in the legislature 3 or 4 years ago, and I've got it this year, I'm going to bring it back this year, Senator Corker called Speaker Harwell, and he was telling Speaker Harwell how sorry I was and how sorry my bill was and how great. Finally, she said, well, Senator, Frank's bill's done one thing that's never happened before. And he said, well, what's that? He said, it made you call me. He said, you have never called me before. You talk about getting their attention. And if a few states would do that, 5, 10 states do that, it would change everything in Washington. Because you talk about term limits. I went back and counted from 1913 back to 1813 and see how many U.S. senators we had in Tennessee. Then I counted from 1913 to 2013. It turns out we had twice as many senators in the 1800s as we did in the 1900s. That means each senator stayed there half as long. It cut the terms in half. Right now, I think the senators stay about 10 or 12 years and the representatives stay on average about 10 years. But it would cut it in half. Pardon?
You said some stay 40?
Some do, but I read the average the other day and I was actually surprised on the Senate average. It was a little less than 12 years, I think, 2 terms. And the House was a little bit less than that. But anyway, that's my spill on the 17th Amendment. I explained it in Washington here a couple of weeks ago. No, it was in Denver. And this group that wants to repeal the 17th Amendment, I told them, I said, I don't even think you all want to repeal it. I think you just want to talk about it. I mean, you can talk about it from now on, never get anything done. We could actually do this, and what you got to do is talk to all your Tea Party friends and say, hey, he's not taking away your right to vote. You're still going to vote in November. He's giving you your Constitution back.
You know, I think what Frank's trying to say is that if it ever came down to the state Senate or the state House nominating the people, is that we would want to get someone with wisdom, experience, and common sense. He knows that that happens, he's going to get the unanimous vote. So I think he's running for something there. I don't know, but you know, and by the way, just so anyone knows, if any of you all remember, I think we had the very first Tea Party rally in Knoxville. It was in the summer. I remember it was really hot down there at the down there at the World Fairs Plaza under that tent. It was in 2008. And I was down there as one of the speakers, so I was at the very first Tea Party meeting that that we had in this county. Let me just, I won't support that, and let me tell you why. I'm one of these old-fashioned Knox County residents. I didn't say politicians, I said residents that wants to vote for the superintendent of schools. I think we need to vote for judges. I think there needs to be this accountability that goes back to the people. I don't have as much faith, in these politicians up in Nashville as my colleague does. And I think that the average citizen has just as much common sense and has just as much ability to decide who they want to be their senator. And rather than when the senator in Nashville calls and he gets the immediate answer, you need to be, that guy that's sitting up there in Congress needs to be accountable to the people directly. And I think, we can have the governor appoint judges, we can have all these unelected people up there, but I think sometimes you've got to be accountable back to the people.
And again, Dr. Briggs, you'll be at the vote in December, but right now our Senate candidate is picked by billionaires in back rooms, and you don't have any say in it, really. You think you do, but you really don't. I mean, they're picked in the back room somewhere. But now look at it this way. Say one of you all out there want to talk to Senator Corker, and you call his office. The chances you get to talk to Senator Corker is pretty darn slim. You'll get a low-level staffer, and if you keep harassing them, you may get a high-level staffer. But you're never going to get to talk to Senator Corker. But if Dr. Briggs had nominated Senator Corker, and you know Dr. Briggs, and you call Dr. Briggs and said, Doc, said, I really need to talk to Corker. He said, well, all right, I'll give you a number. Dr. Briggs calls Senator Corker and he says, Grant Henry needs to talk to you. Here's his cell number. George Corker will call Grant Henry, because if he don't, Senator Briggs won't nominate him next time. Grant Henry's a lot more closer to Corker if he goes through the legislature than if he goes through low-level staffers, medium staffers, high-level staffers. Our founding fathers had it right. Dr. Briggs may be smarter than our founding fathers.
Frank, I might have been smarter than you, because you always get me on these things. I just like to vote for things. I like to vote for people. I don't like the judges all being appointed. We don't have a road commissioner anymore in this county, but they do in a lot of counties. And I think that I just like it where at some point they've got to get down. And by the way, I don't think that a lot of the billionaires in the country got together and decided Donald Trump was going to be president. I think it was a lot of ordinary people did.
I know in the House for the last 5 years we have sent a resolution to both our U.S. congressmen and our senators that they need to come to Tennessee and meet with us in both the House and the Senate so we can all get on the same page. For the last 6 years we've sent that letter. Falls totally flat. They feel no obligation to even respond to us. They feel no obligation to at least say, hey, why don't we meet in Nashville? Well, at least even pretend that you're trying. We don't even pretend between the U.S. congressmen and the House and Senate here in Tennessee. It is frustrating. It's irritating that they don't respond. Frank's methodology of bringing it back that way might actually get their attention, because right now, Tennessee has about, our House and Senate has about a 65-68% approval rating. Congress is running at 7%. And every time we go to the polls, we keep electing the same folks, because we always keep telling ourselves, our guy is good, it's the other 434 guys that are bad. No, it's not that. It can't be that way statistically, that you can run with a 7% approval rating with your guy being right all the time and the other 434 being wrong in the U.S. House. It's time to make some changes. And they won't even talk to us, and we're elected officials just like they are. So I give credence to Frank's. And I grew up in a place where we literally even voted for the inspector of hides and furs. Now, this was a job you wanted, just so you know, because in Texas there's plenty of cattle. But yeah, you wanted the job as the inspector, but it was an elected position. We elected everything. And I like that because it is many times closer to the people than the system we have right now.
The consummate professionals they are, ending exactly at 12 o'clock. Can we all give them a round of applause? Thank them for coming over. Again, I want to extend a thank to Tennessee Liberty Alliance and Talk Radio 90.3. I think if you ask these individuals nicely, they may stick around for a little bit to have a few conversations. I don't want to put you on the spot. But again, we all appreciate you coming out. We appreciate all of you for coming out, and we'll see you next week. Oh, wait, Richard has something to say.
A little bit of a maze.
I just wanted to mention Michaela Coleman that was here earlier. She's the one that got these 3 round tables for us and the chairs. So if you want to find out about what's going on in the Knoxville area, MichaelaAroundKnoxville.com is her website. And I send a great thank you to her. And then also, if anybody in here has any ideas about our radio show, like do a topic, something like that, our email is realnewsradio@gmail.com. realnewsradio@gmail.com. And another show host came in a little bit after the start. Stephen Solomon's in the back of the room. So he comes on 8 to 10 in the morning, Monday through Friday on this station here. And with that also, again, if anyone's looking to volunteer, do some work to get the message of liberty out there, it was myself and social media and a few other people that just kind of put this together. So it doesn't take a whole lot of people. And we appreciate you for coming out. Feel free to contact me at any time. My phone number is 865-386-3667. 386-3667. And with that, also Eric Wyatter over here, he was thinking if some people wanted to go to lunch. I think he's wanting to go to what's called Jackie's Dream, fairly close to here. Eric helped start what's called Campaign to End Civil Asset Forfeiture here in Tennessee. That Facebook page, and if you don't know that issue, you need to. So with that, yes, Don? I have no idea.
You know, I checked on Google yesterday and he said that they were open today.
I don't know. Eric's the lunch coordinator, so if you want to coordinate with him,
Not soccer.
He's your guy. And again, thank you for everybody showing up. Thank you, John Adams, for letting us use this facility. Have a great day.
Great, appreciate it. Thanks. Y'all, you know, we do a lot of these, and I told them even last year, this is when you're under control, it works well. This is the best one of all of these. So I think I told you that.
Yeah, you did.
Discuss something which is real quick. If you got a second or two.
That's fine.
I don't want to.
You want to stop it there?
All right, yeah.